Hello and welcome to A Stitch in Time. Today is Friday, October 20th, 2017, and this is episode 35. My name is Carol and I am known as Knits and Pearls on Ravelry. The show notes for this and every episode can be found on the blog, and they can also be found in the episode thread in the Ravelry group. Come by and join in the chatter, and if you like, you can take part in the Agatha Christie Along, which is a knit along, crochet along that I am hosting in conjunction with reading my way through my Agatha Christie collection. So you can knit or crochet anything that you can somehow tie into Agatha Christie, and I do a monthly drawing for a pattern prize on Ravelry. So this week's episode includes what I'm wearing / a blast from the past. I have one finished project, several works in progress. I'll talk a little bit about what's up and coming, about what I'm reading, and also what's been going on this week in my life here in Chilliwack, British Columbia, which is located about 100 kilometers or 60 miles east of Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. So welcome. Let's get into it, shall we? So what am I wearing? This is something, a short sleeve or almost sleeveless sweater that I knit back in December of 2013. Is that right? Yes, it is. And it only took me 10 days to knit it. It's called Topaz by Carol Feller, and I looked up that pronunciation. It's actually spelled as you'll see on the screen below, but it's a Maori word, and there is a town and a lake in New Zealand that are called Topaz. So I knit this from Quince & Company Osprey, which is an Aran weight yarn, and it is color Wine Sap, which is 133. So it's actually really interesting construction. You knit it sideways. So I'm just going to stand up so you can kind of get a better look at the sweater. So you can see it's joined at the top with a couple of buttons. And there's this lace pattern that runs down the side, and it also carries along the border. And you have a stocking stitch or a seed stitch or moss stitch border running along. And then I'll turn around, and you can see that the same pattern runs down the back of the sweater too. And in my favorite color, red. What I have discovered is for our West Coast climate, on days, there are a lot of days that are simply too warm for a full sweater indoors. And so what I've discovered is a long sleeve t-shirt with a short sleeved wool vest or short sleeve sweater is ideal for that balance. So I don't wear this out a lot, but I do wear it in the house a fair bit because it is super comfortable and just the right temperature. The modification, I did a yarn over knit two together buttonhole instead of the kind that was instructed in the pattern, and I found it was just too flimsy for these big buttons. So what I did do is I just stitched along the inside of the button flap, or the button band here. I attached it to the buttonhole band, attached it to the button band. So this actually can't be undone, but I will never wear it open anyway, and that just makes this section lie a lot better than than it was beforehand, because the buttons were really pulling. So yeah, there you go. One finished project this week. I motored my way through my October Grocery Girls Sock Bash project, and I finished the what I'm calling a few little pumpkin socks. I finished them yesterday or day before. Yesterday, I think, and the night before last, and they actually are still damp from blocking. So what I did is I had first attempted to knit the Little Pumpkin Socks by Sabine Rupert, which featured this pumpkin motif all over the sock. Had two columns like this running up the front and two down the back. And I found with this variegated yarn it was just too busy. Not to mention you know, a little bit fiddly, and I just didn't feel like doing all those fiddly motifs. And so what I did is, instead, as I just incorporated that same motif into essentially a plain vanilla sock. And so this motif runs down the just gotta check. This would be my right sock, so it runs down the outside of my right leg and foot. And then I did, of course, the opposite for the left. So I'll bring it up a bit closer so you can get a good look at those motifs. And then I did an Eye of Partridge heel flap. I thought that would be a nice addition with these variegated yarns. Instead of, I think the pattern, because it has some ribbing, I think it incorporates ribbing in the heel flap. Rather than doing that or just a regular slip stitch heel flap, I decided to do Eye of Partridge. So yes, there I have October's socks done already. So I was worried about getting them done in time because I started so late this month from because I was away. So now they're off my plate, and I'm feeling good about that. Initially, I was kind of disappointed in the way that the yarn knit up on the second sock. I didn't like the way it was distributing itself, and there's still lots of places on both socks now where there's some pooling, etc. But honestly, overall, I don't mind them at all. I think in the end, all the colors actually distributed fairly well. And even around the gusset area, which is often a place where socks do pool in an unattractive way. But I did actually do yarn management on the first sock just to make it pool a little bit more pleasantly. So I did manipulate it a little, but in general, I think they knit up quite nicely. And despite sort of being lukewarm about them, honestly, about halfway through, now that they're done, I actually quite like them a lot. So I'm glad I persevered, and now I have a pair of Halloween socks to wear. I don't think I've ever had Halloween socks before. Not that I generally knit socks for different occasions. I'm going to take a sip of my tea while it's still hot, and I'll move on to works in progress. So, my first one I showed you last week. I am using Black Cat Everyday Sock. Oh, you know what? I forgot to talk about the yarn I used for the Little Pumpkin socks. So it was Cherry Tree Hill Super Sock Select in the Melon of Troy colorway. And this was a custom color that was dyed for the Sock Knitters Anonymous group on Ravelry, when our theme for the month was the color orange. All right, back to this one. Black Cat custom yarn, everyday sock in the Sedona colorway. And I'm calling them my Sedona socks. So I have finished my first one. I think when I showed this last week, I was about here. So I did do up the toe, and then I've just cast on and done a couple of rows of the ribbing on the second sock. So quite happy with how this yarn knit up. I think it's really fun colors. And yeah, I'll just work on the other one as I have time. Usually it's travel or TV knitting. Actually, I was kicking myself because we headed into Vancouver last Saturday, and I hadn't Kitchenered the toe on this sock and cast on the second sock, so I actually had no knitting for my drive into Vancouver. So I was kind of disappointed. I shouldn't let that happen. My second project is the Chimera Cardigan by Carol Feller. And this is a knit along. We get a clue the first clue came out last Saturday. No, 2 weeks ago Saturday. Second clue came out last Saturday. We'll get the next clue, not this coming Saturday, but the one after, and then the final clue 2 weeks after that. I am knitting it in this cake worsted by Blue Moon Fiber Arts. and it's in the bittersweet colorway. It's kind of a rust burgundy blend of color. And so last week I had Clue 1 finished, which was the panel that runs down the back of the cardigan. And Clue 2 involved casting on the front of the yoke for each side of the cardigan, and then knitting across, picking up along the, joining this to the back panel. This is, you cast on a few stitches for your neck stitches, come down, cast, pick up all your stitches on your back panel, and then knit your sleeves out. So I actually, I cast on my right front and did it, and it said to put this, to break the yarn, and then you were supposed to pick up along the back panel and continue. But I thought, oh, I might as well do the left side or the left front at the same time, and expecting that I would then break the yarn on the left front and then pick up my right front again. But actually you didn't break the yarn on the left, so I've just continued doing the left side, and then I will do my right side second instead of the reverse order as it's written on the pattern. They're basically constructed the same, only to do the left and the right, so it doesn't really matter. So here's what I've got so far. So here you can see, again, here's that piece, that's the front, and then you cast on the stitches for the neck, and then pick up your stitches along this back panel, and then begin knitting the body out from there, the shoulder area, and then you join the stitches in the round, and you knit your sleeves down in the round. So this would be the left back, left sleeve and back, and then there's the right front and or left front and left sleeve. So it's coming along really nicely. I am continuing to enjoy working with this yarn. What I decided to do as far as color management went, the skeins are really large. I think they're 250 grams. Is that right? 255 grams. So I had 2 skeins. So what I ended up doing is knitting the back panel with 1 skein, and then I'm knitting both of the yokes and sleeves, pardon me, with the second skein, and I can tell there's a little bit more burgundy in this one. And then I will use the first skein again for when I pick up stitches. The next step is going to be to pick up stitches along this bottom of the yoke and then knit down. So I'm going to use the original skein for doing that so that there's no color break at the bottom of this back panel, because it's just being held on a needle here. So you don't want a line to run across there, an obvious color change. And so I'll knit down from there, and then I'll start incorporating the remainder of this skein and alternate skeins so that the colors, they're this, the colors are well distributed and there won't be an obvious difference. So it's nice that this has so many kind of bits and pieces to it that you don't have to necessarily alternate skeins through the whole project, because that's a little bit fiddly sometimes. So I don't feel like there's a super obvious difference between the two, and it might be more obvious on camera. It's hard to say because I can only see a little screen there, but I think overall I'm not really concerned about having color differences in different sections, because your yarn is facing a different direction anyway. The light will catch it in a different way regardless. So very happy how this is coming along. So I have to have it done by next Saturday when the next clue comes out. So I've got a good week to finish this sleeve and then do the right side of the sweater. So I don't think I should have any trouble accomplishing that this week. That is if I can keep myself away from my third work in progress. I have not shown this project for a very long time. I'm just going to lose some yarn here. One second. Oh, I already did, I think. Fell on the floor. Okay. I've resurrected my mitered square sock yarn blanket. I have been itching to work on this again, but what I needed to do is lay out choose the colors for the next few rows of my squares. And I haven't had a place, well, I haven't had the time or taken the time to do that, and then I wanted to have a place where I could leave them spread out uninterrupted. I used to use the spare room in the downstairs bedroom. We have a single bed down there, and that's where all the kids' toys are, the grandkids' toys. And I realized that that just was not working out so well, because the kids would go in there and play, and then obviously they wouldn't stay off the bed, and the yarns would get all mixed up. So what I did is now that we have our spare room set up, our second spare room, a guest room set up downstairs with the big bed, I took them down there, and the kids don't go in there, and they should be safe. So it's just a matter of taking all my scrap yarn out again, laying it all out, and deciding what I wanted to do next. For those who've watched before, I've explained that a fair bit of planning's got into this blanket. I am not comfortable with random, and so my way of constructing it has been to alternate a row of patterned yarn, either variegated or self-striping or multicolored in some way, speckled, and alternate it with a solid or tonal yarn. And my rule is that each yarn that touches another square must be complementary to that square. And so in some cases I will end up with, say, colors nearby that maybe don't necessarily go together. I'm just looking for an example. But because they're separated by a square or two that is complementary, then it gives this, gives it some cohesion, and it's not so jarring. So I'll just give you a quick glance from left to right of the last few rows that have been knit. I've shown those before. And I'm hanging on to this. There we go. So what I've done since yesterday actually is I've knit, let's see, this one, this one, this one. That's some West Yorkshire spinners. I did this one this morning. That's some Koigu. And then what I've done is picked up for the side square. Now this is the pattern that is done by Shelley King, and it's done on her blog. And how I've altered it is I have filled in these edges with triangles, which makes for a straight edge rather than a zigzaggy edge. And this is how the original edging looks. So this is the bottom of the blanket. And then as you knit your way up, you end up again with zigzags, as you can see. So I was really wondering, deciding what I would do, whether I would do the same triangles on the top and the bottom to fill in and make it a true rectangle, or if I would leave the top and bottom zigzaggy. And I come to the conclusion that I am going to fill them in and make the blanket a true rectangle with square edges. or straight edges. So I'm very close to the end. I've made it so it's big enough to fit on the top of a queen size bed. And so after I complete, oh, and as I'm knitting, just to make it more interesting, I'll knit plain square, a plain square, and then one obviously that is next to it, and then I fill it in with a pattern. So I'm basically working my way across the blanket, doing 2 rows at a time, because alternating the plain and patterned yarns just keeps it more interesting, because then I love to see how it knits up. So what I will do once I've finished these 2 rows of plain and patterned, I'll fill in the top gaps here with triangles, solid, and then I'll go back down to the bottom of the blanket and choose some solids that complement these patterned yarns, and I'll fill in those 2. And then I'll be ready for a border. And I haven't decided what kind of border I'm going to do yet. The pattern calls for an I-cord edging, which I think would be nice, but also very time consuming. And so I'm considering just doing like a crochet border, because that would definitely be a lot faster. So that's still to be determined. That gives you an idea of some of the early squares of the blanket. And then there's this whole mass that goes all in between. I love this project. It's so addictive. Once I start working on it, it's all I want to knit on. It's just simple garter stitch with decreases. There's something really soothing about it. I also enjoy the process of picking up stitches, and so picking them up for the next square is also very satisfying. And now I'm so close to the end that I'm really, excited about seeing it finished. At the same time, I'm kind of sad about seeing it finished because I've enjoyed it so much, and so I'm trying to decide if I should start another one or some other sort of scrap project. I do have a barn raising quilt begun. Actually, the squares are right here. Just gonna reach over. I have them stored in just a plastic thing that, I don't know, pillowcases or something came in. And so I do have a number of squares done. Let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I've got 13 done and 1 on the go. They've all been blocked. I've used mostly solid or semi-solid tonal types of yarn for this blanket. I didn't want anything too crazy. And I've sort of decided I'm going to make it single bed size and put it in that spare room downstairs. So I just don't enjoy these as much as I enjoy doing the mitered squares. On the other hand, I'm a good way in, and I really should pick up this project again and continue it and at least finish one blanket in it. So that's kind of where I'm at with my scrappy sock yarn projects. So I'm starting to think about what I might do next with all the little ends. I realized after having them out, I've actually in my blanket, I don't think I've duplicated any yarns, except as I was knitting this gray square yesterday, I looked over on the edge, and I'm not positive, but I think this gray square might be the same yarn. They're slightly different. I can see in this lighting that this is a little bit more silvery than this one. So maybe they're not, maybe they're just very similar. I was so far into it at that point, I just decided, oops, I dropped a stitcher. I just decided it didn't really matter. I don't think anyone's going to be looking that closely, or if anyone but me is going to care, so I left it. What I have for up and coming, I don't have a patterned picture to show you, because the pattern hasn't yet been released. I'm part of Helen Stewart or Curious Handmaid's newsletter, and we received word this week that she had a new shawl design that was being actually debuted today at the Indian Tangled Rhinebeck Kickoff. And it's called the Surprise Party Shawl. And if you buy it by today, then you get a 25% off discount. And tomorrow, price goes up, and if you've pre-purchased it, the pattern will appear in your Ravelry library. So the people on the newsletter did have a little surprise peek, so I have a sense of what it's going to look like. The pattern page, not revealing any secrets here. The project page does say that it is a half circle shawl, and it's revealed the yarn that it's using, which is some Hue Loco yarn, and it's in 1.5 skeins of fingering with 20 gram mini skeins that complement it. So I immediately thought of these two yarns. I've had both in my stash for a while. Those of you who've watched for a while might recognize this as one of my failed yarns from my So Faded sweater. And it's Sweet Georgia yarn, Tough Love sock. And this is called Smitten. This Tough Love sock. So you can see it has white background with gold and fuchsia and purple variegation. And then I purchased this Party of 5. Again, it's Tough Love sock, Sweet Georgia yarns, Party of 5, which are 5 28 gram mini skeins. And you can see the colors are very complementary. Now, I only have one skein of this, but I'm hoping, because these skeins are larger than 20 grams, that I will be able to, once I see the pattern, I'm hoping I'll be able to just use these two yarns, not have to purchase a second one of this one, and see if there's a way I can just make it, incorporate all the colors and all the yarn into it and not have to buy a second skein. So I have a feeling her patterns are often quite versatile, or that you can, alter them. So I'm excited to see the pattern come out tomorrow and actually get a really good look at it and decide how I might make it work. So that's an exciting. Just popping in after the fact to say that after I recorded, I went online and found the pattern in my Ravelry mailbox. So I actually can show you a picture of it, and I do think it will be easily adaptable to the yarn that I have on hand. So here it is now, and there's a look at the back. So as you can see, it's alternating the main yarn with stripes of the mini sets. So I think I should be able to find a way to incorporate what I have into this pattern. So looks like another winner for Helen Stewart. So it's nice to get it a day early. So you can go on Ravelry and see all the pictures for yourself. And it is on sale until tomorrow, October 21st. So if it appeals to you, get your hands on it at a discount if you can. Back to the regular podcast. So I did some sewing this week. Last week I mentioned that my daughter had asked me for some help with her two daughters' Halloween costumes. So this week I sewed this little pinafore for my younger granddaughter. She's just about 3, and she's going to be Alice in Wonderland for Halloween. So first off, my daughter had bought this secondhand dress, and it has a little jacket that goes with it that she's also going to use, and she had cut off the I'm not even sure what she cut off the skirt. She wanted it shorter anyway, so my granddaughter wouldn't trip on it. So I got this just with a raw edge, so I was quite easily able just to turn it up into a hem. So I did that, And then I used a free tutorial called the Little Birdie Pinafore. It's on the What's Mummy Up To blog, and I'll put a link in the show notes. And the original was made for a 6-month-old size. But she also provided an idea of which measurements to take so that you could alter it for a bigger size. So I used that pattern as a guideline. I actually, instead of having a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I did a 5/8 inch seam allowance, just because I just felt that that would be a little more durable for a garment, even though it's just a Halloween costume. If I was to make this as a real piece of clothing, I think there are a few things I would have done a little bit differently. For instance, you do the front and the back and you just join them together in a seam. I probably would have somehow inserted the back into the front waistband so there wasn't a seam sticking out, but that's a minor thing. And also attaching the pinafore bib to the waistband. I, again, would have probably inserted it in a waistband rather than have it sewn on just onto the back of it. But those are little minor things. For a costume, I just have to keep saying to myself, it's a Halloween costume. It's a Halloween costume. So I did get to try out my, I bought a new sewing machine about 1.5 years ago. So I hadn't actually done buttonholes on it before. So I tried out my buttonholer, which I really liked. It worked really well. And all that needs to be done here is my daughter wants to add some lace along the strap. And also I just pinned the straps in place, but I need to try it on her to put them in the right, put the right length. I made the straps nice and long, so there is plenty of room to alter it if necessary. And also she wants to put some lace just on the bottom of the blue dress also. So we're going to go shopping at the fabric store next week to pick those up, and also pick up some tulle. I'm going to make a tulle underskirt for my older granddaughter's Queen of Hearts costume. So that should be a very difficult task. Other than tulle's a bit of a fiddly to work with, but the actual process is pretty easy. Just needs a rectangle with a elastic, or casing with elastic through it, sew up the back, and she'll be good to go. Okay, what am I reading? I've really enjoyed getting back to my Agatha Christie books. So I quite quickly finished up Murder in Mesopotamia. This one I had read at least a couple times before. I was right about who the murderer was. Again, found it a bit far-fetched. I'm gonna do a spoiler here, so if you don't want to know who done it, skip the next little bit. It was the woman's husband, who had apparently died 20 years before, and she remarried this other man. And somehow didn't know it was the same man. Okay, if you had met your significant other, husband, boyfriend, whatever, 20 years ago, not seen him for 20 years, married him and been married to him for a few years, he dies or disappears, and he comes back 20 years later, don't you think you'd recognize him? Even if he tried to disguise himself? Anyway, that was apparently what happened in this, and I found that a bit hard to swallow. As an example, when we went down to the Dominican, I took my seat, and there was a couple sitting there, and I introduced myself to them, and start chatting, where are you from, etc., etc. Long story short, but one of the first things I said to him was, you look familiar. I imagine we've met through one of these events before. But as it turned out, we went to school together the last 2 years, high school. And actually, our fathers were friends. They played soccer together. My dad used to take his car to his friend's shop to get work done. And this was his friend's son, who has since taken over the business. So even I graduated 36 years ago. So even 36 years later, I saw someone who looked familiar, and I didn't even know him very well in high school. We weren't like friends or anything. As soon as he said who he was, then I could kind of picture his face in the yearbook. But, okay, so if it had been my husband, I think 20 years later, I'd have recognized him. Okay, enough on that subject. Moved on to Cards on the Table. Another book I have read before. The plot is that this man who's he's a little bit on the creepy side from all accounts, invites Hercule Poirot and 3 other people related to crime, inspector, like police inspector, and a doctor, and Ariadne Oliver, the novelist, makes her debut in this book. Invites them to a dinner party at which there are supposedly 4 people who have committed murder but haven't been caught. And lo and behold, over the course of the evening, the host is murdered by one of 4 people that were playing bridge in the same room. And the 4 crime-related people were in another room playing bridge there. So now Poirot's trying to figure out, well, and the others are trying to figure out which one of them killed their host without anyone else noticing. Now, I've never played bridge. Agatha Christie includes in here samples of these bridge scorecards, which supposedly help solve the mystery. So, I don't understand any of the terms they're using as far as playing bridge goes, but enjoying this story anyway, as always, and we'll see. See, about halfway through there. And then the next book is not going to be an Agatha Christie book. My daughter bought the latest Dan Brown book and lent it to my husband and I. So my husband's just about finished it, and when he is, I'll read it, and then I can pass it back to Jessica. So I feel like I'm talking. My mouth is really dry. And my tea's getting cold. So my week, well, I always say it's a busy week, and I guess that term gets to probably be a bit old. It just seems like there's always something going on. So last Saturday, as I had mentioned, we went down to Vancouver to the Vancouver Canucks hockey game, and we hosted some customers for dinner in a restaurant they have there, and then you have seats adjacent to the restaurant that you can sit in after dinner to watch the game. And it's a really nice way, I feel quite spoiled, nice way to watch a hockey game. And so the game, it was really fun to go. Dinner was delicious. The company was great. Fortunately, the Canucks did not play very well and lost. It was kind of a disappointing game in that sense. It was funny because I guess my daughter was watching the game at home on TV, and she texted my husband to say that our younger granddaughter didn't believe that we were actually there. Could we take a selfie and send it to her? So I guess, so we did, with the rink in the background, and I guess she squealed and started kissing the camera or the phone. So anyway, it was kind of funny that she didn't actually believe that we were there. And everyone had a white Canucks scarf on their seat, so we actually got those and collected a couple extra and gave them to that family because they're all Canucks fans in that house. We like hockey. We don't really watch it as a regular thing around here. I usually forget about it. I like to watch hockey. I grew up with my dad watching hockey all the time. It was something that was always on in our house, but I personally don't really watch it regularly, but I do enjoy a game when I see it, and especially to see it live. It's always more fun to see a sports event live. So Sunday we knew was supposed to be a really nice day weather-wise, so we made plans to kind of get our yard ready for fall and winter. So I cut the clematis back down to nothing, pulled a bunch of bedding plants. We got rid of our hanging baskets and planters from our deck, put our outdoor furniture away, got the grass cut, washed all the outside windows, which was great because then the weather hit on Monday, and it's not bad today. It's kind of overcast now. We've had a little bit of sun peeking through earlier, but this week we've had 2 storms that have come through with wind and heavy rain. When I went to bed last night, it was pouring rain again. So we got all that done just in time. So it always feels good to kind of beat the weather to those jobs, because sometimes they've gotten put off for one reason or another, and then, you know, they never kind of get done really well. So we're ready for fall. And then Sunday evening, Cameron and I went to the curling club. They have quite a few people who had taken the Learn to Curl clinic and were interested in curling right away, but there weren't enough spots in some of the regular leagues. So they're going to set up a novice league for Sunday nights before Christmas. And so they were looking for volunteers that could just go and help out with, they were doing a couple of weeks of practice before they actually start. So we spent our Sunday evening there, and I still feel like a lot like a novice myself. This is just my 4th year curling. But it was, you know, I feel like, well, maybe I don't really have anything to teach anyone. And the reality is I think you know more than you think you do. And I know that when I learned, I took the clinic and you threw a few rocks and you kind of got told how to sweep, sort of. And then the next thing I did was play a game. So it's really nice. These new curlers do have a chance to actually practice throwing rocks quite a bit and learn to sweep and do all those things before they actually play a game. I wish I'd had that opportunity. So anyway, that was really fun. We're supposed to go this coming Sunday also, but Cameron, he won't be doing that. He cut his toe quite badly on Tuesday at work. And so he didn't curl last night like he normally would, and he's still hobbling along. So he's not going to be curling Sunday. I'll probably go, but then last night I was curling and I don't even know what happened. I was sweeping and my feet went out from underneath me and I landed on my right butt cheek. And it's bruised and it's kind of sore. So I'll see how it is come Sunday, whether I feel like exerting myself too much or not. It's nothing serious. It will, you know, it'll go away. I was going to say it hurt my dignity worse than it hurt me, but actually it really hurt. Ice is not very forgiving. I don't know what even happened. It just felt like I slipped, but I do have... when you're curling, you have what's called a gripper on your shoe that has... I have curling shoes. One sole is slippery because you need that to slide out of the hack when you're curling, when you're delivering your rock. But then when you're not when you're not doing that, you put well, it's called a gripper. It's a cover over the sole of your shoe that won't slip on the ice. And then your other curling shoe has a sort of a built-in gripper. Well, that was the leg that went down. So I'm not really sure what happened, but I've purchased a second gripper for that shoe. So I should be a lot safer now. So yeah, anyway, neither here nor there, wasn't in the world. And we actually had a surprisingly good game. And we tied it up in the last end. So it ended in a tie, which felt pretty good. We were playing a pretty good team. So that was very satisfying. We have a new member this year, and she curled quite a long time ago when she was in her teens and is just getting back into it now. And so she's, it's taking her a while to catch on again. So, we're not as strong a team as we were last year, but, I think every game she's getting more confident and it's coming back to her. So we're not there to win, really. Like, we're there, it's nice to win, but we're there to have fun and socialize, etc. So it doesn't really matter if we win or lose, but it's nice to have some close games and nice to feel like you've played well, which I did last night. I had a good game. Trying to see what else I've got written down here. Oh yeah, Tuesday night, I'd forgotten, I had totally forgotten. I forgot to mention it last week that I was hosting our regular ladies' night here on Tuesday night. This is a group of women. Originally, there were 6 of us that worked together at a craft store. And when the craft store closed, we wanted to stay in touch. And so we each invited a friend, or in my case, I invited my younger sister to join this group. And we would meet once a month and share food and sometimes play games, sometimes just talk. We've done a few, I think on our first or second gathering was actually like a murder mystery night where you come in costume and you play a role and somebody's got to figure out who, you try and figure out who committed the murder. So that was a really fun way to kind of get to know each other. And it was weird because the next month when we met, you got to see what people really looked like, because in some cases people look quite different from how they really look in real life. So we've just realized it's 15 years now that we have been getting together, which seems crazy. And there's a few people have come and gone, so we're down to 7 of us, and I think there's like, we're all original members, and 3 of us, 1, 2, 3. 3 of us used to work together. So it's been neat to be able to stay in touch with those people. And anyway, so it was we're looking for volunteers who wanted to host the first one of the year. We meet basically from fall till spring. And so I thought, oh, why not do it? I hate to say it, kind of get it over with. That's my turn's done. And so we did that. So it was fun, just catching up after the summer break. And I've been really into, so I'm just going to look at my things, see if there's anything else. Been really into comfort food the last couple weeks since we got back from holidays. So I've been doing things like spaghetti meatballs and chili and macaroni and cheese, for things like that for dinner. And so when we have this ladies' night, 3 people bring an appy, and then the person hosting provides dessert. So I decided to make apple crisp because it just sounded cozy, and I knew it was going to be a rainy, kind of a miserable night. So that went over really well, and it was just done just before everyone arrived. So you walked into this nice cinnamon, spicy smelling house. It just felt so cozy. I tried a new recipe. I was making quite a large one, and I decided just to go online and see if there was another recipe to try. And I came across one that I'll include in the show notes. Got really good reviews, and I changed a couple things. It called for a cup of white sugar mixed in with the apples, which some people said was too sweet, and I've never added sugar into my fruit base before for an apple crisp. So I did add a 1/4 cup of sugar. It called for cinnamon. I substituted apple pie spice, and it called for water in the apple part, and I've never done that either. I've always found apples juicy enough, so I didn't put the water in, and it was fine. But I really liked the topping. The proportions for the topping were really nice. And I ended up, because I had sort of a time limit, it took me a bit longer to prepare than I expected. And so I put it in it said to bake it for 45 minutes. I put it in for 35. And then I took it out and I threw it in the microwave for 5 minutes on high. And then I put it back in the oven for 10 more minutes. And it was just perfect. I was worried about the topping getting too brown in the oven if I left it too long. So it was really good. So I'm going to put the recipe in, and you can take note of those changes if you're interested. But I'll be using that as my go-to now. And I used... forget how many cups of apples they called for. I used 9 apples in all. I had bought 4 Granny Smith, and then I added 5 Honeycrisp. And I had enough for everyone, and then I had enough left over the next morning for breakfast. Warmed it up, and it was really good. Also, the other day, while I was grocery shopping, and I thought, I should pick up some cranberries while they're still in season to throw in the freezer for baking. And then when I got home, what I realized is I already had that great idea. I'd only forgotten about it. So I have lots of cranberries in my freezer now, but I decided to make some cranberry orange muffins. And when I went to make them, I realized I didn't have any orange juice, but I did have some leftover lemonade from having people over. And so I used that, and then you have you do use some orange rinds. So I took some the zest off the orange, and then I squeezed the orange juice out of that one orange, mixed it with the lemonade, and actually it turned out they turned out great. So I'll also include that recipe. I don't make any other than that swap. I normally don't make any alterations to this recipe, and to me it's like the quintessential cranberry orange muffin. So I'll include that if you're interested too. So my sister moved out here yesterday. She's my oldest sister. She's moved from, she and her husband used to live about an hour away by car, and they bought a townhouse out here where I live. So that will now have 3 out of my 4 sisters living within about 10-mile drive, or 10, it's probably 10-minute drive. So that was really nice. Sounds like everything went okay. Unfortunately, the weather wasn't that great. I guess it was dry where they were when they loaded the moving truck, but it was raining here when they got here. And it also sounds like there's a little bit of challenges fitting some of their present furniture into their new place. Rooms are a little bit smaller, I think, and but they'll work all that out. So Cameron and I are going to go see them tomorrow, check out their new place. So I'm really excited to be having now 3 of my 4 sisters living so close. It'll make getting together for family events a lot easier. Oh, and then on the way home from curling last night, I saw my check engine lights on in my car. So we're taking it in Monday morning. Cross fingers, it's nothing serious. So I think that is it for the week. I've talked long enough. My throat is dry, and it's time for lunch. So I'm going to get this uploaded to my computer, start doing the editing, and hopefully I can get it up without too much difficulty. Last week I was having trouble uploading it, and then with the program that I use to edit, so my son recommended that I just save it as a file and upload it on my own, and that did actually work much better. So I'll be doing that again this week, and then from now on. So yeah, the challenges in producing the podcast continue, but every time something happens, I learn something new. So it's good. It's a good learning opportunity, right? So once again, I thank all of you for sharing some of your time with me. I always appreciate that you choose to watch, and I also really appreciate any comments that you leave me. I see them mostly on Ravelry, but I do check YouTube every so often, and as you'll see, I try and respond to everybody's comments on there too. So yeah, thank you for watching. Have a great week. I should be back, as far as I know, next, I'm going to try probably next Friday. So until then, take care and happy knitting.